The Atlanta Braves starting rotation will get a lot of coverage this offseason, and for good reason. We'll start out by taking a look at the internal options for the Braves. Do they need to go out and get more? We'll discuss that as well and throughout the rest of the offseason. But specifically today on this episode of Locked On Braves, we'll look at the internal options. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jacob Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure you check out my written work over at BravesToday.com. Make sure you follow the podcast on social media at Locked On Braves or Locked On _ Braves. Sorry for that. Make sure you send in any questions, comments, or feedback you have for the podcast. Always trying to make this as interactive with you as possible. We'll have our mailbag episode coming up on Friday as well, and I'll send out a tweet from that account, and you can respond with your questions. So make sure you follow us there. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Hit the thumbs up button. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for all your support of the show, not just during the season, but those of you who stick with me through the off season as well. And we're going to have a lot of coverage. World Series wrapping up this week, and then we are right into the off-season grind. Things are going to really pick up here over the rest of November and early December. So we got a lot coming your way here the next month or so at Locked On Braves. So make sure that you are subscribed. On today's episode, we're going to talk about probably one of the biggest discussion points that I think we're going to have this offseason, and that's around the starting rotation. I feel like if there's going to be significant moves made this offseason, it's likely going to be in the starting rotation. One reason being there's just not a lot of holes to be filled position player wise. We talked about left field and we'll continue to do so, perhaps shortstop, but there's just not really a lot of work to be done at the position players right now. They're all pretty much locked up. Of course, we thought that about the catcher position going into last offseason, and then, the Sean Murphy for William Contreras trade happened. But I feel like a lot of focus this offseason will be on the pitching. So today's episode, we're going to take a look at the starting pitching. We're going to take a look at the internal options, telling you who the locks are, and then what that depth looks like, where the Braves could potentially make some upgrades. And I know a lot of you have been very vocal about that, talking about the Braves needing to make some upgrades. And I want to give a shout out to everybody who is here with me live right now. We got Jeffrey Humphreys, Barracuda, Gavin, Joseph Greenwell, Golden Child. Thank you so much for being here with me live. I do these shows in the off season pretty much live 5 days a week around 9 p.m. Central, 10 Eastern. If you want to check that out and join live with me. Also, happy Halloween. We are recording this on Halloween at night. We got Leland Hurd in here as well. Thank you so much for joining the show live. I'll answer some of your questions later in the episode, as I always do. But let's get into our discussion looking at the starting rotation for the Atlanta Braves. What's up to Joey Me right now? Killing it in our fantasy football league. I am fading. Thanks so much for joining, Joe. Let's take a look at the starting rotation. Let's start out taking a look at the locks. And for me right now, there are 2 locks at the moment, possibly a third, depending on what happens with Charlie Morton. But you got Spencer Strider and you got Max Fried. Those are your 2 aces. And I think they're co-aces. I think you can go either way you want to with those guys. For Spencer Strider, if I had to, bet right now, and I'm not a betting man, but if I were, I would say that he's going to be the favorite going into 2024 to win the NL Cy Young. Many people out there believe he's the best pitcher in all of baseball right now, or at least the most dominating pitcher in all of baseball right now. So the Braves have that headlining their rotation. Some Braves fans might still trust Max Fried a little bit more, and I understand that, but looking from an outsider's perspective, Spencer Strider is likely going to be, if not the favorite, one of the favorites to win the NL Cy Young Award going into 2024. So that is definitely one of your horses at the top of the rotation, and a guy that you feel really good about when he takes the mound. He was good in the postseason as well. He did everything he could to give the Braves a chance to win a game. I think about that game 4. He had nothing working but a fastball and was able to get, pitch into the 6th inning and keep the Braves in the game. That's just how good and how talented he is and how good that fastball slider combination is. I think if there's one question for Strider going into 2024, this will now be, his 3rd season. I know his 1st season and started in the bullpen, but, pitched to, started a lot of games that year. This was his 1st full season of rotation. Now you're going into essentially your 3rd year. Is it time to maybe make some adjustments, maybe add in that pitch or, offer that change up a little bit more? I'm curious to see what Spencer Strider does, in the offseason going into next year, if he changes up anything or if he continues to go with mainly the fastball slider combination. It's obviously still working for him, but I think at some point he will have to adjust a little bit, but I still think there's more in the tank for Spencer Strider, which should be pretty scary for other teams out there. Golden Child says Strider learning a curveball or a splitter would be so nasty, and it certainly would. With the home runs that he kind of struggled with this year, giving up home runs, I would love to see him work, more on a splitter or a sinker or something with a little bit more downward movement, try to avoid some of those home runs and get people off his fastball. The slider is just unhittable, when it's on, and it's usually on. The only time I didn't see it on was game 4 of that postseason start that he had. But I would love to see another pitch with some vertical movement to see if he can, get people off that fastball, maybe see his home run rate dip back down a little bit. It was way higher this year than it was. I think it was almost double what it was the season before. So that's certainly, if you're looking at one area for Strider to improve on going into 2024, it's the home run ball. And it seemed to happen in every start. He's rolling along, dominant outing, and then boom, 2-run homer, 3-run homer in the 6th, 7th inning to really destroy his line. Otherwise, I think he runs away with the Cy Young Award in 2023. So I still think there's room for Strider to get better, and he's one of your locks in the rotation. The other lock is Max Fried. And I know this was a somewhat disappointing year for him from the standpoint that he just wasn't on the field enough. When he was really, really good, but just wasn't able to stay healthy, missed a good portion of the year. And then obviously wasn't 100% going into the postseason dealing with the blisters issue. I've had people come out and tell me that Max Fried can't stay healthy. That's just not true. Before this year, he made at least 28 starts in the 3 full seasons before this year and made 11 starts in the shortened 2020 season. So has he, missed a start here or there over the last several years? Yes, but for the most part, he's been there, for the majority of the season. So this was the first year that he missed significant time. But he is still a guy, when he's healthy, when he's in there, he's certainly one of your aces and he's going to get the ball. And the Braves are not trading him. I know some people have said that as well, or hinted that, suggested that, or at least asked that if I thought the Braves would. No. Your best chance of winning a World Series in 2024 is with Max Fried in your rotation. Plus, even if you're not going to extend him, and we'll have that podcast and that discussion at some point, even if you're not going to extend him, you still use him throughout the season. Hope that he's healthy. Hope that he's there for you in the postseason. But at the end of that, you can still give him a qualifying offer and get the rewards from that and get another draft pick. So, again, they're not trading Max Fried. Might be his last year with the Braves. I predicted before. I think that is the case. So enjoy it. But those are your 2 locks, Spencer Strider and Max Fried. Those are your 2 locks in the rotation going into the offseason. Charlie Morton would be a 3rd if he returns, and I think he will return. I'm leaning towards him returning at this point. Maybe the Braves can convince him to come back at a little bit lesser contract, maybe $15 million. I think $12 million is probably what I would pay for him, but maybe he gets more like $15 million, or he just retires. But if he wants to come back, play another season, he may have to take a little bit less money to do so, but I think he's coming back. So if he comes back, that gives you, three locks for the rotation going into 2024. You need at least one more, quality starting pitcher, like a Stroman, like a Montgomery, somebody of that ilk. I think the Braves still need to go out and get, even if Morton comes back. If Morton doesn't come back, you need 2 of those guys. I don't think they're going to shop at the top of the market. I don't necessarily think they need to. Other than Snell, I don't, Nola to me is more of a 3 anyway, and I think he's going to get, 1 or 2 type money. Blake Snell's probably going to get more money than I'm willing to pay either, but I trust the consistency of Snell better. Either way, I don't think they're going after either one of those guys. So I think it would have to be a combination of 2 of those, middle rotation spot or middle rotation type of starters. Or like I mentioned before, you take a shot on some guys looking to rebound, like a Lucas Giolito, a Jack Flaherty, or a Luis Severino, guys who have been really good in the past. And Barracuda saying Gray's the apple of his eye. No idea if it would make sense financially. He's probably going to have a qualifying offer attached to him, which I think hurts his value a little bit because you're paying for a mid-30s starter. You're probably going to be paying $20+ million a year for him, which already makes me a little uneasy. And I think there's going to be some regression for him. Alan Hayes talking about would roll the dice on Bauer. I'm going to do a full episode on him because too many people are asking. We got to talk about it. But those are your locks right now. Strider, Fried, Morton if he returns. I think you need one more guy that you can go out this offseason and get to be a lock for the rotation. Joseph Greenwell says Jordan Montgomery. That would be great. I think he's probably outpriced himself with this World Series run that he's had. By the way, the Rangers looking like they're about to go up 3-1, take a commanding lead in the World Series. Hopefully Diamondbacks able to fight back and make a series out of it. But those are your locks. Next, we want to look at the depth of the Braves starting rotation, where they have a lot of depth, but it's not necessarily guys you can trust, which is why they're not locks. We will discuss all of those guys here next. NFL season is in full swing, and you can get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. Just $5. You win that bet, $150 in bonus bets. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. I mean, you got World Series going on, you got NFL, you got NBA, you got NHL. There's so much happening right now. So now's the time to join a FanDuel. The app is so easy to use. They have a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get in all the action. NFL, again, World Series. You got at least Game 5 coming on Wednesday. Hopefully that's not the end of it all, but you got the World Series, all sports action going on. Make sure that you go to FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NFL. All right, and you continue to listen to the World Series with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Getting into the other rotation candidates for the Braves. And again, I'm just running down a list of candidates. I'm not saying that I particularly love these guys. I did try to kind of put them in order of guys that I prefer. Bryce Elder's first up on this list for me. He'd probably be in the rotation right now if opening day started, but with the way his season ended, I think you certainly he's got to earn it again going into spring training, which look, he didn't lose it this past spring training. I want to make that very clear. He was fine this past spring training. It's just Dodd and Shuster were really good, and that proved to be fool's gold. And the first half from Bryce Elder proved to be fool's gold. Now, was that him just kind of running out of gas, or that was just the overcorrection from his first half? He's probably somewhere in the middle there. He's probably more of a 4.2 ERA, 4th, 5th type starter, and that is perfectly fine. The problem was the outings later in the year were far too short, not able to make it 5-6 innings. And when he was rolling like he was at the end of 2022 and at the beginning of 2023, he was eating up 5-6 innings every time out and just wasn't able to do that down the stretch. So hopefully he becomes that guy again. And right, like I said, if the season started today, I'd probably have him in the rotation, obviously depending on what happens in the offseason. Then I got Darius Vines and Allan Winans. Those are my 3 guys right now that I put, just outside of the rotation. Those are guys that I could slot in as a 4th, 5th starter if no other moves were made. And I think moves are going to be made, but it's Elder, Vines, and Winans for me. Then I have AJ Smith-Shawver, and the Braves could take the Spencer Strider route from 2022 with AJ Smith-Shawver if they wanted to, start him out the beginning of the season in the big league bullpen, where I think he would be outstanding. If he has the command. We haven't really seen command from him. We've seen control. He's been able to throw his pitches for strikes, but not necessarily command them. And he's been very effective with that. But the Braves could take the 2022 Strider approach, start him out of the bullpen, and then move him into the rotation when there's a need. I don't think that will happen. I think the Braves will go out and get some starting pitching this offseason, which will allow AJ Smith-Shawver. I think they'll get some bullpen arms too. And I think the bullpen will be okay to start the year where you don't need AJ Smith-Shawver out there. I think the better approach would be to send him back to AAA, allow him to continue to develop and hopefully get that better command of his pitches. And then if you need him later in the year, assuming he gets off to a good start and has a good season, then you bring him up if needed. I think that's probably the better approach for AJ Smith-Shawver. He's still really young. He still really needs to develop. He was thrust into action before probably he was ready. Last year, the Braves moved him really quickly. And there's probably some developmental steps missed there along the way. Not that he was terrible when he came up to the big leagues. I just think I'm so high on him, and I think he can be so good. I don't want him to miss that development that he needs and that all pitchers need at those higher levels. So I said this was Strider in 2022, and I was completely wrong, and the Braves handled it, great, and it worked out fantastic. But he was Strider was a guy coming out of college, a little bit more polished, a little bit more experienced. AJ Smith-Shawver is a kid that really didn't start throwing until his senior year of high school. There's still a lot for him to learn, and I think he needs to be sent back to AAA to learn those things and continue to develop. So that's what I would do with AJ Smith-Shawver. I would start him back out in AAA. Beyond him, Jared Shuster and Dylan Dodd, two guys I mentioned that were fantastic last spring and certainly earned and deserved those opportunities they got in the big league rotation. But it was rough. It was very rough. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It was not great. And they got a lot to prove if they're still here in 2024. Those are guys that definitely could be traded this offseason, although I can't imagine that their value is too terribly high. But they're good. They're guys that, I should say, they're guys that can be good and certainly have some potential. I mean, Dodd was somebody I was really excited about going into 2023, and then he showed out in spring training, and it was just a disastrous year for him at both levels, at the major league level, and then when he got sent down to AAA, it was just as bad, if not worse there. So it was just a dud of a year for him. I know he's out in the Arizona Fall League right now trying to continue to get work and turn things around, but hopefully both of those guys have better showings in 2024. And look, they're there. You're going to need those guys over 162. So it's good to have that depth and guys who, have that experience. And look, not every pitcher is going to come up and just all of a sudden, immediately have it. I shouldn't say all of a sudden, but they're not just going to come up and immediately be those guys that they were at the minor league level. It's not just a physical adjustment and player talent. It's also a mental adjustment. So not ready to just, shelve those guys. I think you're going to need them over 162. Going to have Colby Allard as well. He still has options, and that's good depth, somebody with a lot of big league experience. And then the two other guys who I'm not sure. Yonny Chirinos, who's out of options, and Michael Soroka, who are out of options. It's hard to imagine both of those guys coming out because I just don't know that you can guarantee them a 40-man roster spot. Or a spot in the big league roster. So, look, I was over Chirinos after 2 starts. I saw him at the big league level, and maybe I should have been that way with Soroka, but I obviously have some fan attachment with him. I could see them non-tendering Soroka and then maybe working out a minor league deal to bring him back, and I hope that happens. I hope that's the case. For Chirinos, just let the man go. The Braves see something there, and I would love to be proven wrong, but the Braves clearly see something with him that they think they can unlock. We'll see if it happens, but those are your other candidates right now. See Barracuda mentioning Waskari Noah. I put him and Ian Anderson as possible options later. Anoa could be ready from the beginning, but I imagine they want to ease him back in, and he has minor league options. So I think they'll probably, take it a little slow with him. I wouldn't count on him from the jump, but he is certainly an option later. And Ian Anderson, maybe second half of 2024. Prospects that could debut. Certainly everybody's excited about Hurston Waldrop. He's a college guy, pitched in the SEC, pitched in the College World Series. He's a guy with a lot of experience. They moved him up rather aggressively last year, set him up for the possibility to pitch at the big league level in 2024. But again, I kind of err on the side of caution with him as well. Similar to AJ Smith-Shawver, great stuff for both of these guys. They're 1A and 1B for me in terms of Braves prospects, and I think both of them can be top of the rotation guys, but both of them need some more developmental work, and specifically on the command for both of those guys. So I wouldn't count on Waldrop to start this season in the big league rotation. He may come into spring training and get an opportunity depending on what happens. But I think, he most likely will start the year in AAA, and it may be maybe later on in the year. Maybe I put him in the possibly later column as well. Luis de Avila, I put Owen Murphy and Giancarlo Lara on here. I don't think those are guys that are going to debut this year, but they did finish the year at high A, so it's not out of the question. If they go on and have good seasons, Lara is somebody with his fastball slider combination that is so good. I could see him being a bullpen option later in the year, and that may ultimately be where he lands. But I could see him as a bullpen option later in the season. Owen Murphy, he has that good command. I talked about it. It's not overpowering stuff to me, but he has that good command. I'd trust him, if we get to that 13th, 14th guy in the rotation. What my rotation would be right now, I'd have it Strider, Fried, Morton, Elder, and then, either Winans or Vines. I'd probably go with Vines. He looks really good down the stretch. So if you're asking me right now, before I see anything in spring training, before any moves are made, my 5 would be Strider, Fried, Morton, Elder, and Vines. And that's if Elder or if Morton comes back. If Morton doesn't come back, then it's probably Strider, Fried, Elder, Vines, and Winans. And that would be a bit scary going into the season if that's my 5. So certainly, whether Morton comes back or not, there's some additions that need to be made in the rotation. But even if Morton comes back, I feel like there has to be another move made. You're going to need 10 to 13 starters over the course of a regular season. The Braves, again, have 9 right now, not counting Morton, Chirinos, Soroka, or Inoa. So they already have good depth, but they need some more quality guys at the top, because you're going to hear me talk about this a lot, because unfortunately 162 just doesn't matter to a lot of people anymore. And this next coming up season, I'm going to talk about the postseason. Look, if this team doesn't make it to the postseason, that's just a huge disappointment. They are built right now. If you made no moves, I think this team could still make the postseason. You just need 84 wins, 86 wins to get in. I think this team could do that if they made no moves. But this team needs to make moves with the postseason in mind, which is why you need to go out and get a third starter that you really trust. Look at Game 4 of the World Series tonight. Bullpen game, essentially for both guys, although Andrew Heaney's a starter and went deep in the game, but not many teams have 4 starters that you trust in the postseason. You got to have at least 3 guys, though, that you feel very confident in, and you got to make moves this offseason with that in mind. So that's what the Braves have internally right now. Again, I think that'll definitely change and should change by opening day, but it's still a good base going into the offseason. When you got that much depth with guys who have experience coming back, that is certainly great starting pitching depth for the Braves. All right, next I want to get into your comments and some of your questions for those who are here live. We will get into those next. I want to thank you so much again for being here live or watching the replay, however that you consume Locked On Braves. Thank you for your support. If you want to continue to listen to the World Series, you can also do that over on SiriusXM with the SXM app. All right, I'm going to jump back into the comments and questions here really quickly. Thomas Helms, need Bulldog guys both in the lineup and the rotation. That's been the missing link the last 2 years. Stroman, I think, definitely brings some fire. He probably has blocked the entire Braves fan base on social media, but certainly a guy that plays with fire. I know a lot of people mentioned Jock for the position player side of things. Matthew Brittingham, it's likely Fried won't stay healthy in the future. He's frail and sickly. No one can deny he is very thin for an MLB player. No one can deny he misses games due to illness, sickly. Has it happened? Yes. But again, prior to this season, he made at least 28 starts in each of the 3 full seasons before this and made all his starts in 2020. I mean, for the most part, Fried's been there. Yeah, he had the sickness going into 2022, the illness that he had. And he had blister issues going into this postseason. All pitchers are going to be banged up at some point, but for the most part, Fried has been there. Barracuda, where are the Phillies on the Dombrowski curve? How many years are we from them starting to fall off? It's an interesting thought, I think, with the Phillies, because you look at their roster, it's a lot of guys who are already in their 30s or, well into their 30s, about to be in their 30s. It's a much older team than this Braves roster. You wonder how much longer can Zach Wheeler, keep it up. And I'm certainly not wishing this or hoping this, but just with all pitchers, it happens at some point. I got to think their window was probably the next 2 or 3 years with this group that they have. You look at Trey Turner. I mean, speed's usually the first thing to go. Bryce Harper's had all his injuries. He's still obviously amazing. JT Realmuto is already somewhat on a decline. Kyle Schwarber has the big power and on base. I think that's going to be there. But I think the biggest thing is their rotation. How long can Zach Wheeler be this good? Maybe they're about to lose Aaron Nola. They got some guys, Ranger Suarez, Christopher Sanchez, Andrew Painter, one of the top pitching prospects in baseball. I think it's how quickly do they supplant that starting rotation. I think their lineup probably has 2 or 3 more years of being, still really good if those guys all stay healthy. Joey Me, AJ Smith-Shawver being on the postseason roster is telling to me. I think with a good offseason in spring, he is someone who could start in the pen till him at innings and then move into the rotation late May. Certainly possible. Like I said, they could go the Spencer Strider route with him and do that. Leland says, I continue to believe Soroka will surprise folks next year. Maybe out of options complicates the deal. Chirinos, bye-bye. Yeah, Braves got a love thing going on with Chirinos. CJ Palmer, Jake, do you think we have a shot at signing Sonny Gray, and would it be worth giving up a draft pick if Gray gets a qualifying offer from the Twins? I don't think it will be worth it. Like I said, I think you're going to be paying $20+ million a year for a guy, in his mid to late 30s who may be coming off the best year that he's going to have. I think there's going to be some regression for him, and you're giving up a draft pick, which is super valuable to the Braves right now. I don't think it's worth it, in my opinion. Would he be a good, solid pitcher? Yes, but you're going to be paying him top of the rotation money for somebody that I think is going to be a number 3 starter. Joseph Greenwell, how do you think having Matzek back in the bullpen will help with the hype? Hopefully good. I mean, who knows how much the injury had an effect on him last year, but you were seeing him decline a little bit already. We got to see what he looks like coming back, but certainly could help if he's back to old Matzek. Barracuda, we talked about Huascar Ynoa, also said, speaking of low velo guys, I've got a question for the last segment of the show. Why do we have so many guys at the upper level as depth guys? Is that par for the course? I can't really answer that. I don't know the depth of all, 30 teams out there. I would say the Braves are in a good position with the depth that they have. Yeah, they don't have a lot of guys throwing high velocity type starters. They don't have, the Gavin Stones, the Bobby Millers, Ryan Pepios like the Dodgers have, who have, not only great depth in the rotation, but guys with really big stuff. But I think they've done a great job developing pitchers and guys who, like the Bryce Selders, like an Owen Murphy even, who can locate, come in, and get outs. But other than the Waldrops and the AJ Smith-Shawvers, maybe even the Lara, they just don't have a lot of guys with that high velo type stuff. I don't know if that's something that they've, just been targeting in drafts or if it's a development thing. But again, I don't know if that's on par with all other 29 teams. We can't just be Joseph Greenwell. We just can't be a team that uses 16 starting pitchers like we did in 2023. You won 104 games that way. And again, like I said, my mindset in 2024 is, are you ready and built for the postseason? And I think to do that, if you need to skip guys throughout the season, if you need to give Max Fried rest, Spencer Strider rest, whoever they go out and get, Charlie Morton, for me, it's more important that those guys are rested and healthy for September, October than it is April, May. So if you got to use 16 pitchers to get through the regular season to make sure those guys are ready for October, I'm all for it. Barracuda saw some chatter that Vines was impressive at AFL. I think he may have the largest upside of the low velo guys at the upper levels. Yeah, I think he won the Arizona Fall League Player of the Week a couple of weeks ago, but then had a bit of a rough start. So, he's fine. He's going to be a 4th, 5th starter, kind of in that Bryce Elder type of mold. See, we got a couple more here. Joseph Greenwell, we need to give Shawver and Vines more opportunities, especially in spring training. I think they'll get shots. Barracuda, Dodd, and Shuster had really concerning seasons. Shuster pitched more, and the walk-to-K ratio was ghastly. And that was, Shuster was a good control guy, so that was a bit odd to see. Zachamania, Liberty Media won't spend any money. We all know that. They had over a $200 payroll last year. They definitely have shown that they will spend money and went over the luxury tax for the first time ever. The question is, will they do it a second year? Because that tax gets higher. Mark Riggs, could we get more bang for our buck with $20 million than Charlie? That's why I think if Charlie's coming back, the Braves possibly need to renegotiate that down to a little bit less. Jason Rogers, T. Bowers is an AA value. Again, we'll do a full podcast on Bauer. A lot of people asking about him. What's up to Alan Haynes? Thanks for joining the show. Barracuda, sinker splitter for Strider would be amazing. Certainly would be. And Carter Smith joins as well. Thanks so much for being on the show. Blake Newsom on here as well. Happy Halloween to you, Blake. Appreciate you joining. Thomas Helms, who's more likely to be a Brave, Snell, Montgomery, or Gray? I'd say none of them, but I'd probably say Montgomery out of those three, just because he doesn't come with the qualifying offer. I think that means something for a team like the Braves who need those draft picks. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thank you all for all those who joined, asked questions, all those who listen on replay, watch, whatever you do, again, to support Locked On Braves. I really do appreciate it. Hope you all had a great Halloween. Hope you're ready to get this offseason going. As Joseph recap says here at the end, Rangers about to go up 3-1 in the World Series. We could really be getting into the offseason grind next week, looking at those contract options that have to happen 5 days after the end of the season. So make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.